As you come towards the middle, people start getting up late, and then they're up to miss a service or two. And that is not unlike life. If you allow your life to just drift, that is exactly what will happen. If you do not plan for it, things will just take you by accident. You'll just drift along and you will drop out. Therefore, it is important that from the beginning you have a perspective and you have a plan. The work that our pastor and indeed the Kingston congregation is doing is one of the most important in the world today. We have found ourselves at the spear point of God's work. Mr. Herbert Armstrong did so much to restore the truth that was lost for so many centuries, largely to the world. But my question today is, has he fully restored the faith? He has restored a lot of the truth, but has he restored the faith? Jesus Christ asks rather hauntingly, if when the Son of Man returns, will he find faith on the earth? Is the faith that we are living today anything like the faith of the first century Christians? Surely we identify with them because of many of the doctrines, but do we have their spirit? Do we have their drive? It is a question that is important for all of us, as individuals and as a church. Yes, we have many of the hallmarks of what the first century church preached, but is that enough? The challenges that face those first century Christians are a bit different from the challenges that we face today. For instance, none of us are being hunted and killed. The biggest challenge that we face today may be if we interview for certain positions, certain jobs, and we don't get it because of Sabbath keeping or holy day keeping. But for the first century Christians, it was their very life, their very existence depended on them compromising the faith. But how is our challenge different? Today we have many different other challenges. And if we do not remain focused, surely we will be swept aside. One of the things that has taught me and has kept me throughout the years is my role as a conductor during the services. It teaches me a lot of lessons. Some time ago, a member said to me that there is nothing to conducting. You just simply select any two songs, just open the Bible, read perhaps a psalm, and just call somebody to pray. That has not been my approach to it. I have approached conducting it as much as I would prepare for a message, because there are so many things that are dependent on what I have to do. There is so much effect on others, so therefore I cannot take it for granted. And this is a metaphor for how I have approached my life. As Christians in the 21st century, there are other challenges that we face today that were not faced in some ways by the first century Christians. And based on the time that I have, I want to focus on three things that can trip us up that we need to be aware of. As we come down to the final days of the feast, there is a sense of weariness that is setting in. Some people are beginning to get tired. And there are three things that I'd like us to look at: distraction, disapproval, and discouragement. There are other things, but these three areas are areas that have been a killer for modern Christians. People have become distracted. People want the approval of others, and people have become discouraged because of the sacrifices that they have made for the faith and the seeming lack of reward. How can we avoid those pitfalls? Distractions come in different forms. They are the distractions that come through pleasure, the distractions that promise us enjoyment. And then there's distraction that is the result of pain. We are distracted because we are suffering lack or because we are suffering in some other way. The distraction of pleasure is a dangerous one because it seems harmless. It seems like it is harmless fun. For instance, one of the things that make it difficult, before I address that, one of the things that makes it difficult for us in the Church of God is that our religion as practice seems to make it easier to drift across the line into worldliness. For one, we're not very strict on the type of clothes that we wear and how we wear them. We're not very strict on the use of, say, alcohol. We're not very strict on the type of music that we listen to. So because of that, sometimes the lines can become blurred. And in blurring those lines, sometimes well-intentioned will slip across the line. And we become so distracted and so enamored by these things that it is very difficult to recover the position from where we started. So, because of our liberal positions and how we define worldliness, some people find it easy to transition into the Church of God, but find it easier to transition back into the world. So that is something that we have to be aware of. Some of the things that might promise us some pleasure momentarily, but they can result in us losing our way. Then there's a distraction of pain. Some of us here, as we are coming down to the end, we are reminded of what we are going back to. We have been able to take our minds off some of the things that have been happening where we came from, in Canada, where we came from in Kingston, in various other parts of the world. But the reality is about to set in. Some people were mentioning before we came that sometimes they worry that when they leave their homes, maybe a robber might go in there and take out their things and so on. But sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes you leave all your family at home, and going back to them may be a challenge. You may be down here, and since you're down here, you get a call from your friend next door that the neighbor heard some sound and was wondering if thieves were breaking in. When they opened the window, is your husband coming out of the house with a woman 3 o'clock in the morning? 3 o'clock in the morning. Or vice versa. You come down here to praise God and your wife, who is not a member of the faith, you see him coming out of a BMW 3:30 in the morning. And all the sermons that you're hearing about rejoicing and all of these things. They're just going through, passing through. You never hear them. Because what are you going to do now? You have invested 20 years, 15 years in this person. And the moment you come down here to rejoice and praise God, this is the reward that you get. Or maybe... or maybe you're down here and you had a prospect of getting a good job, and you get a text to say that you weren't selected. Or maybe you submitted your name for a contract. Or ask somebody to submit your name. And when you inquire, you heard that the person didn't submit your name, but they instead submitted a friend's name. And you have not been shortlisted. You're going back to your home knowing that you're going to be unemployed, facing long-term unemployment. You don't know how you're going to pay the bills. Bills are due, you're probably in debt, and you don't know what you're going to do. These are painful distractions. Different ones of us are made up differently. Baptism and acceptance of the gospel is a chance to reset, to restart. But if you are restarting, that means you must have started already. The process of making it into the kingdom of God does not just begin when we come into the church. From birth, we are accumulating things that are an influence to us. Some of them are good influences, and some of them are bad influences. And we're going to spend our life trying to deal with some of those bad influences that we have acquired. And some of them, even when we get baptized, they are still with us and are a powerful influence in our life. The reset button was supposed to wipe everything clear. But we'll find that we're easily beset by some things. I tell you, depending on your personality and what you have been developing, your challenges may be different when you get baptized. When you come into the faith, your challenges may... For instance, some things that are easy for one person are difficult for another. And sometimes you come here and hear preachers waxing eloquently and quoting the scriptures. But when you are faced, when the rubber hits the road and you are faced with certain trials, you find it difficult to apply those scriptures. In my travels on the road, because I do work on the road, I come across many different challenges. It is a matter of your perspective. It is a matter of your mind. It's a matter of how you look on things. Before I had the vehicle that I have now, I had one that gave me lots of problems, and sometimes I was on the road late. And sometimes being on the road late and being on some of the off-roads in Portland and so on, late in the evening when you're coming back, you go through communities that don't have regular running water, and people bathe by the river. All kinds of different people. And they bathe in their birthday suit. Now you know that Christ said if to look upon a woman and lust after her, that is sin. But sometimes it's difficult to bear that in mind. That is why I say it's a matter of perspective. And sometimes when that is not strong enough, you have to remind yourself of other things. One, from the outset, I told myself that I was never ever going to get entangled by those things, because you don't know, I'm not from there. I can be driving on those narrow bad roads and steering, instead of steering the vehicle, I'm steering with my eyes, and around the corner comes a truck. And I'm just killed. But I could park up and stop. I could park up and stop, be staring at the wrong person, and her boyfriend or husband come around with a cutlass or a machete. And that's the end of me. I could also foolishly stop, be steering, and get robbed and killed. Sometimes God is protecting us from ourselves. Sometimes God is protecting us from ourselves. But that one could be easy for some persons. That wouldn't be a challenge. I give you another one. When I was doing some work for Digicel, I was working in a bucket truck. You know, a bucket truck is like what the utility companies use to go up on the power lines. And as I said, it's a matter of perspective. I was on the bucket truck one Sunday doing some restoration work. And as the truck approached the pole, there were other vehicles parked there, so we couldn't easily access the pole that I was supposed to be working on. So the truck had to maneuver in a certain way that restricted my movements. Anyway, I went up in there, opened the box to work on it. Now I'm working with very thin wires, some of them thinner than actual thread that they try to put through a needle. Thin wires. People are depending on it for their internet. People are depending on it watching TV, on the phones. Even though it's Sunday, people are doing business deals, people are doing educational things. So I have to be very, very careful and be very focused. That I'm adjusting these wires, and then when I'm through, I have to take a picture, submit it, and then get approval before I can leave the site. I am fixing up these wires, and I'm in front of a home. They have these tall walls in this home, almost like a compound, and there's a tall side wall. A woman comes from around the back, turns on the hose, and then turns it on herself. As though that is not enough, the woman then proceeds to take off all her clothes. She takes off all her clothes, and then a second woman joins her. I tell you, it's a matter of perspective, you know, because I am trying to maneuver the bucket now, and when I maneuver the bucket, I'm coming in contact with stripped wires, which you know in Jamaica can be very dangerous because people steal. So I'm trying to adjust because I have to take a shot, and the women are in the shot. And then the second woman says to the first woman, see the man up there, I can hear, see the man up there, you think that they would dash back inside? The other woman said, well, make him see. No, you would think that is a major problem, but I'll tell you it's a matter of perspective. Because it was not the distraction that you might think. I wanted to get them out of the shot, and I wanted to get them, they weren't in my mind so much. I'll tell you why. I was not physically attracted to the woman, for one. She could easily have been my mother. And no offense to anybody, but as big a fella as I am, I would need a twin to balance her on the scale. So that was not my issue, right? So when I first started telling her the story, it might have sounded excited now, but we are like going, ew. No, it's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of what you have in your mind. Because when I went back and was relating the story to some of the other guys in the yard, some of them were saying I was foolish. They would have just enjoyed the show anyway, they don't care. But it's what you are there for. Because to be distracted by these people, I would stand to lose money. Because I'm working on a time schedule. And am I going to give up that distraction? Am I going to be distracted by that and be cast away from my eventual goal? No. So it's a matter of your perspective. But my friends did not approve of how I approached it. Which leads me to the other part, disapproval. Trying to obtain the approval of people in this world can be a very difficult thing to deal with. And sometimes it's not people that are far from now, because if this were broadcast, the feast here and our messages were being broadcast all over the world on Facebook, and the Pope were to come in contact with it and disapprove, we would all wear it as a badge of honor. Correct? We would all think that that is a great thing, because we have no real soft spot for the Pope. But if our family members or our friends or somebody in the church were to disapprove of us, That would be a bigger challenge. That would be a bigger challenge. All of us want acceptance. It's a natural human trait. We want to be accepted by those around us. None of us want to be ridiculed. I spoke about the first century Christians because the first century Christians had a perspective that it was them against the world. It was them against the world. If you look in Acts 2, they sold their possessions and had everything in common. And if you go through Acts 5, it will show you the details of how they lived. They consider themselves separate from the world. Do we consider ourselves separate from the world? It's difficult because we have to work and so on. We have to associate with people. But how do we consider ourselves different from the persons in the world? Do we live as they do? Do we have the same perspective? Do we approach life the same? I think that is a major challenge for us as 21st century Christians. How to be in the world but not of the world is a major, major challenge. And I believe that is what is killing most of us as Christians in the Church of God. Because we want to achieve what the people of the world are achieving. And in a sense, there's nothing wrong with that, but at what cost? Everybody, all of our friends have huge flat screen TVs, and we still have a big back. Our friends are changing their cars every year or every 2 years, and we are still taking the bus. Our friends come back to work, our co-workers come back to work on Monday and brag about their exploits. And we were at home after Sabbath service, alone, hugging the pillow. Can only read a romance novel and read about the achievements of people who are enjoying the world more than we are. A woman, you're 30 and you're not yet married and you're not dating. It's a challenge if an offer comes along but the person does not have the faith. And in Jamaican parlance, they want to taste and buy. They want the proof of what they are getting into. It's a challenge as a woman if you are 30, approaching that age or past that age, and your only prospect is for somebody who wants sexual relations before they can consider permanently settling down with you. It's a challenge as a man in the Church of God. You approach 40 and you're still living from paycheck to paycheck. You may be married and you may have kids, but you're still living from paycheck to paycheck. Other people around you have money to spare. Even in church where you come here, people are going to go back to the feast with money in their bank accounts. You barely made it here. And you have to skip 1 and 2 meals since you are here. It's a challenge not to bridge that gap by accepting an offer that would end that kind of existence. You're tired of living from paycheck to paycheck, and sometimes not making it from paycheck to paycheck, but having to borrow from people who tell you that your faith is worthless. It's a big challenge. It's a challenge when you invest in somebody who has let you down and betrayed you. So as we prepare to go back from the feast, these are some of the realities that we are going to have to face. We're going to have to face people who appear to be more successful than us in this world. How are we going to deal with those challenges? If our minds are not stayed on the message of the kingdom of God, it's useless to come here, spend all this money, get hyped and pumped up for a few days, and by Friday, we are depressed again. What is our perspective? The perspective of the first century Christians who kept the feast like us was that they were in a world that was not theirs. They were in a world whose existence was going to come to an end. They were in a world whose rewards were temporary. But they were preparing for a world whose reward was permanent. So their existence did not depend on the things that were around them. They did not depend on the approval of those around them. And they weren't easily distracted by them. The third problem that we're going to face as Christians is discouragement. Discouragement saps the energy. Discouragement is difficult to deal with because it strikes at our very spiritual energy. We mean well and we want to do well. And we're working hard. Working hard at developing our spiritual energy, our spiritual vitality. We are studying and so on. And then we are hit by sudden illness. Long-term illness that drains our finances. That means that we have to be at the doctor constantly. We are hit by long-term unemployment. We are hit by abandonment by our mates. And as much as we want to share and be vibrant in the work and be helping others, it's difficult to get our minds off those issues. Very, very difficult to focus our energies. And I'll share this with you. We were called and all given gifts for the benefit of others. God has called no one that he doesn't intend to strengthen the other people around him. All of us here, even if you don't get a chance to come to the pulpit here, you have a purpose. You have to realize that it is not just the persons that come to the pulpit here that have a purpose. All of us have a purpose. So God calls us with a purpose and gives us gifts to accomplish that purpose. But what if we become so distracted and discouraged that we are not fulfilling that purpose? It is impossible for God to continue to work with us and give us more of those gifts if those gifts are not being exercised. All of the persons that God ever called and blessed with gifts and that grow, it is because they are sharing that gift. If you are called into the church and nobody is a beneficiary of your gifts, do not expect God to be blessing you and be giving you more of those gifts. So if your gifts are dormant and not being activated, do not expect from God. You'll get from God hasn't given you for yourself.